Hi there, Joan here. Thanks for coming and spending time with us today. This is the first in a series of videocasts put out by Nodelcorp. Its topic would be generally about climate risk and resiliency. Today's presentation is about risk assessment and how to control their costs. If you do like this presentation, feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. If you want to know more about Nodelcorp, please click the button below. So now I'll send you over to Joel, and I'll see you later. Bye.
Thanks, Joan. In today's videocast, I want to talk about controlling climate assessment costs. Assessments are a key component in your resiliency program because without knowing your risks, you really have no basis to address them. But I often speak to people who believe that assessing climate risk will be very expensive. Because of their concern about cost, they defer taking any action. Even worse, sometimes they just don't do anything at all. Not evaluating climate risks leaves us exposed to potentially devastating climate events. And in some cases, it can also leave us exposed to missing really interesting strategic opportunities. This is a situation where not knowing actually increases our risk. Unidentified and unaddressed risk can seriously hurt your organization. A comprehensive and deep climate risk assessment can be very expensive. Full-bore assessments can cost hundreds and thousands of dollars. And even for a large organization, this can be a large chunk to swallow. Because of this, organizations vigorously debate these decisions about whether they're going to proceed with a resiliency assessment or not. And it can take several budget cycles to reach a conclusion if it ever gets approved at all. The question is, does it have to be that way? Basically, does it have to cost so much? My simple answer is no. But containing cost does require some soul searching. You will need to develop explicit expectations for the work and ensure that any contracted services directly address those requirements. While this may seem obvious, we often miss it. Assessment scopes can be developed by staff who have no clear sense whatsoever of what their leadership is expecting. They really don't know what is the ultimate objective of the work. And that lack of clarity can lead to scope creep. This will inflate the costs, and in some cases it can cause quite serious friction between the consulting team and the client. The first step in controlling risk assessment costs is establishing clear, measurable objectives to guide you through your resiliency program. What do you actually hope to achieve? And this will vary from organization to organization. We need to consider your risk tolerance. That actually focuses the work. When we speak to risk tolerance, what do we mean? Basically, we're asking the question, how much risk can you accept from any one climate event? And if possible, you want to quantify that in dollar terms. In addition, wherever possible, you want to identify the level of social impact that you find unacceptable. And this will require some soul searching. These are not easy questions, and they can take some considerable thought. Some of my clients have asked me to define their risk tolerance thresholds for them. This is actually a difficult request because tolerance thresholds are based on your own organizational culture, and they can vary considerably from client to client. Ultimately, if you leave it to me, the assessment will provide my perception of acceptable and unacceptable risk. And that may not necessarily align with the perception of your management team. We try to manage this through active consultation. Basically, we mine risk tolerance information from our meetings with staff during workshops. This is both time-consuming and can be very expensive. It takes a lot of professional time. So the clearest and most important step to control climate risk assessment costs is establishing objectives and criteria that provide clear ground rules for the assessment. And you need to do this before you hire a consultant to do the work. Once you've defined explicit objectives, you can tailor your assessment to focus specifically on those goals. You can save costs by limiting the assessment to focus on your specific issues. It's not necessarily the same list of issues and considerations provided in assessment protocols and tools. Remember, this is your assessment, and it needs to meet your needs, not the needs of a generalized client defined by a standards organization somewhere in Europe. Once you've done this, we can offer a package that targets these criteria. As a consultant, this allows me to be much tighter in my budgeting for your project. I don't have to build in contingency funding to cover unexpected questions that you may ask and additional research. In the long run, this is going to save you money. We find that often, at least in the early stages of climate resiliency programs, there's no need to conduct a comprehensive assessment. Detailed work requires extensive research and very specific climate data development. This is labor-intensive and potentially very expensive. We find it's better to phase the work, do a high-level screening first, identify potentially serious exposures, and then apply resources for research and data development on those specific problem areas. You can get good definition of what those problem areas are by comparing your screening results with the objectives that you set earlier. In fact, issues are only really issues if they get in the way of achieving your objectives. By definition, a risk is only a problem when it pushes your organization towards its risk tolerance thresholds. If it doesn't, then you can defer action, and in that way you can save a lot of money. Once you've completed the screening and have identified your red flag areas, you can conduct detailed, focused analyses on those specific issues. Target your dollars on those issues that trigger your risk thresholds and objectives. Instead of spreading dollars over a wide range of concerns, most of which are not problems at all, you can target resources where they have a real impact. These are the areas that potentially significantly affect your organization. Once you treat your identified risks, you are well into the first cycle of a climate resiliency program. This is a stage where some folks figure they're done. They may complete this assessment, take concrete action, and then simply close the file. They believe that now everything's under control. Unfortunately, uncertainty is risk, and the future is uncertain. With this in mind, we consider climate resiliency to be a cycle of scan, identifying your risks, analyzing them, trading them, monitoring whether the treatments are successful or not, communicating results around the organization, and then that takes you back to scanning the environment again. We like to consider, how have things changed? Do we have new data? Have we experienced an event that changes our view on what we really consider to be serious and not serious? It doesn't need to be expensive, though. It can be as simple as an occasional meeting with internal stakeholders, and you discuss these issues to provide input to your management team. With that said, however, it should never be neglected. Failing to identify a change that leaves you unprepared can be very expensive. Unplanned events are generally much more resource intensive. They draw on unbudgeted budgets and can cause disruptions that carry on for a very long time. Applying these principles, you can allocate most of your resources to those specific issues that cause you the greatest concern. But you're not done. Establishing effective treatments to address your risk profile can be tricky. There are usually a range of options, some of which can be very expensive engineering, redesign, and construction projects. In my experience, however, much of the risk can be mitigated with minor procedural changes, such as improved maintenance practices and general awareness. What we find is that during an assessment process, your internal experts at workshops will identify these options. We always try to capture as much of this as we can during the workshop, because generally they're the most cost-effective ways to manage the risk. Nobody knows your operation better than you do. Often, all it takes is a few questions from a climate expert to start the discussion rolling. Even so, things do change over time. More detailed work can uncover issues and opportunities that your high-level screening overlooked. With this in mind, you should continually scan your risk environment in light of new data. This is an integral part of your process, especially when the program delves deeper into problem areas. How do new findings affect our previous observations and decisions? These checks can help identify and prevent potentially serious outcomes. One of my key takeaways from my ongoing work in climate resiliency is that the early work provides greater clarity and definition for what is to come. We never try to get things perfect the first time around. And this may seem a bit defeatist, but we're usually just getting things underway. As we progress through a program, we refine and hone our work. We may identify new risks. Sometimes we clarify the issues that we perceive to be serious, where with a little more thought, a little more analysis, not all that serious at all. Because we see the work as a cycle, we always have a chance to revisit and refine our earlier efforts based on new knowledge, new experiences, and evolving climate science. It's only when we see the work as one and done that things become a problem. With that mindset, we'd have to dig broad and deep in one assessment. We can't leave any stones unturned, as that may represent an unidentified liability. This sort of work is expensive, and even with the best of intentions and with full professional rigor, they're flawed from the beginning. The risk environment begins to change the moment the consultant leaves the premises. The assessment ages quickly, and it rapidly becomes irrelevant. This is a scary thought, at least for me, as we can believe we're safe, but in fact are growing increasingly exposed to new and evolving climate risks. I find it's much better to think of this as a process. Ultimately, climate resiliency should be viewed as a continuous improvement cycle. We set objectives, we take action, we monitor our progress, and then we revisit the objectives on a planned schedule. This is the surest way to control your climate assessment costs. I'll now turn you back over to Joan for a few concluding thoughts. It was great speaking with you today. See you next time.
Thanks, Joel. If you want to learn more about risk assessment, we encourage you to check out the standards. There's ISO 31000, and more particularly its supporting standard, ISO 3110. These provide a wide range of assessment techniques covering the gamut between screening level studies to detailed quantitative procedures. There's also COSO ERM, and these provide perspective on holistic risk management that can really help you contain costs. Finally, we strongly recommend ACES's RIMS Risk Assessment Standard, as it provides a unified overview of the other standards. At the end of the day, a small investment in acquiring these standards can give you insight to considerable cost savings in your climate risk assessment programs. We are here to help. We always enjoy discussing climate risk and resiliency issues. Check out our website, Nodelcorp.com, and sign up for our weekly blog, or simply contact us. Thanks for your time today. We'll see you next time. Bye.